Good morning, everybody. Saving one of the tougher topics for last, so this is probably gonna be my last math video for the year. Can't believe we got here. So we finished up unit 4 last week, and obviously we only have 1 week left of school. So what I decided is I wanted to pick off one of the tougher topics we had to leave out. Just thinking about next year, just thinking about what's going to be the most useful for next year. And I did pick a pretty tricky one because it has a lot of little things that we didn't go through this year. So really pay close attention on this one. And I'm going to jump right into it because I think this could end up being a pretty long video if I don't just get on with it. So we're going to be talking about Pythagoras Theorem. So before I get into what this is all about, I just have to clear a few things up. So first of all, this is called a right angle triangle, okay? And it's called that because it's a triangle that has one right angle. And we know that it's a right angle because a right angle usually has that little box there. And that tells you it's 90 degrees. Now, you might have noticed that I have these 3 sides labeled A, B, and C. Well, that side right here, this one that's labeled C, that's called your hypotenuse. Now, this one's actually pretty special because, one, it's always the longest side, and it's always directly across from the right angle. That's a really important side to note. The other two, it doesn't really matter which one you call which. You can call that B and call that A. It doesn't really matter, but that one is always C, and that's always our starting point for every question we do with this. Now, pretty much what this formula does is it allows us to find the length of one side if we have the other 2 sides. So I can find C if I know A and B. I can find A if I have C and B. And I can find B if I have C and A. So we can do this just using some algebra, and we don't have to like measure anything with the ruler. And plus, that's usually not how we do these problems anyways. You'll usually see that it's not drawn to scale kind of written on the side. So that kind of implies that you have to use the formula. So here's the formula. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. Now, that formula on its own doesn't really do too much for us. So we use a bit of math to re-scramble it. I'm not going to explain how I got these just to save a bit of time. But this is the important stuff here. So if you're trying to find the hypotenuse, also, a truck just honked outside. Hopefully you guys heard that. So you would use this formula to find the hypotenuse. And then you would use this formula to find either one of the other sides if you already have the hypotenuse. And these are basically the same formula because, like I said before, it doesn't really matter which one of these 2 you call A and B. So just try to think of this as 2 main formulas. We're going to end up using one or the other. So we're going to do some examples in a second. I just kind of wanted to sort of lay everything out in steps for you guys here. So finding the length of a missing side in a triangle, or finding the missing length in a right triangle. So the first step is to figure out which of these 2 formulas you're going to use. The second step is to plug in the information that you know, plug in the 2 numbers that you do know, and square them. I will talk about that in a second. The next thing, either add or subtract the 2 numbers that you got from here. And that depends on which formula you had to use. So if you're using this one, you have to add them. If you're using that one, you have to subtract them. And then finally, you have to find the square root of your number from this step. Now I'm going to talk about what squaring and square rooting a number is. So when you square a number, it basically means that you're timesing it by itself. So if you have a number like, let's say 4, and can you see that? Yeah. And there's a little 2 above it. That just means that it's 4 times 4. You're timesing it by itself. We saw this a little bit when we were talking about surface area. And square rooting a number is just going back the other way. So you'll have this little symbol here and a number below it. So let's say 25. Basically what this is saying here, this is like a math problem right here on its own. What number times itself will get you 25? Now the answer is 5, but luckily there's a button in your calculator that will do it. Now yours probably looks quite different from mine. But I got that little square root symbol right here. So I'll go second square root, and then I can just push in my number, and it will tell me that it's 5. So yeah, there you go. So I'll do a couple examples here. Hopefully this isn't going too long so far. And I'll try to keep the steps handy. And I will post this on Edmodo too, because these steps can come in handy for sure. So the first one here, okay? I got this length here is 18 centimeters. I got this one here, that's 12 centimeters. And this one side that's directly across from the right angle, hint, hint, that's the side that we're trying to find. So we're trying to find the hypotenuse. We're trying to find the one that's across from the right angle. So that's C, and we can call that A, and we can call that B. Okay, and you'll probably notice already that on question 2, we actually have the hypotenuse already. So step 1, we're going to figure out which of our two formulas to use. Now I am looking for the hypotenuse in this one. So I'm actually going to use this guy here. C equals A squared plus B squared square root. So let's write that down. Now I'm going to plug in the two numbers that I have. So I have 18 for A and 12 for B. So I'm going to have C equals root 18 squared plus 12 squared. Step 2, well, I've plugged them in already. I just have to square them. So just on the side here, I'm going to do 18 squared and 12 squared. Now, you can just do 18 times 18 for the first one, but there's actually a little button too. You see that little X2 button? That will actually let me square the number. So I can just write 18 and then that, and I'll get the same thing. So 324. And then 12 squared, that's 12 times 12. I already know that's 144, but you can do that in your calculator as well. And I'm just going to plug those back in. So I have 324 plus 144. Now for the next step here, step 3, we're going to have to either add those two numbers or subtract them. And since I'm using that first formula here, I'm going to add the 2. And I'm just going to keep them under the square root like that. So 324 plus 144, I get 468. And now for the last thing, I have to find the square root of 468. So I'm going to hit my square root button first and then put in the number. Now usually you end up with a crazy decimal. That's okay. Let's just go to the 10th. So 21.6 centimeters. And this is just a regular length, so it's not squared, it's not cubed or anything. That's just our answer. And also notice how it's the longest side in this triangle, which is a pretty good sign that we did this correctly. Let's do one more here. So in question 2, I already have the hypotenuse, the one across from the right angle. So that's C, we can just call that A and we can call that B. So we're trying to find B in this case. So step 1, we're going to figure out which formula to use. We're trying to find one of the other two sides, so we're going to use this one because we already have the hypotenuse. So B equals root C squared minus A squared. Step 2, I'm going to plug in my two numbers and then square them. So C is 25 squared minus 16 squared. And now we're just going to square those two. We can just do this on the side here. It's 25 squared and 16 squared. I believe 25 squared is 625. Yes, it is. And I believe 16 squared is 256. Yes, it is. And now I'm just going to plug those two back in. So B equals root 625 minus 256. Now for step 3, we're actually going to subtract in this case because we already have the hypotenuse. So we're going to subtract. So 625 minus 256, I get 369. And now I'm just going to find the square root of 369. So square root 369. I get 19.2. I'm just going to round. 19.2 meters. This length is less than our hypotenuse, so that's a pretty good sign that we did it correctly. And I'm just going to leave it at that. So I know that there's a lot of information in this. Again, this would have been a really good topic to teach you guys in class, but it is what it is. If you don't really like my explanation, there's tons of stuff on YouTube about this kind of stuff. And yeah, so this is my last video. So I hope you guys have an awesome summer. Okay, I hope you stay safe, make good decisions and all of that. And I had a really good time teaching you guys this semester. I really mean it. Okay, so gonna sign off before I start tearing up here. So yeah, have a good summer, guys. Take care. Bye.